Crash victims return to Russia. The remains of some of the 224 victims of a crash in Egypt return home for burial. GOP candidates demand change. With 3 more debates ahead, a call for new ground rules. Mexico bound. We learn more about the Holy Father's apostolic pilgrimage to visit the Mexican people. And Royal Championship. We find out how Kansas City players prepare spiritually for winning World Series games. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for All Souls Day, Monday, November 2nd, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The remains of more victims of a weekend plane crash in Egypt return to Russia tonight. Saturday's crash killed everyone aboard the flight from Egypt to Russia. Bodies are arriving. Russia observes a day of mourning after the deaths of 224 people on board a Russian passenger jet that crashed in Egypt. The grief here is evident. The cause of the crash is not.
The most important thing right now is to do the investigation with international standards and find out what's the reasons for this tragedy. And we also are going to help relatives who lost families there according to Russian laws.
Flight 9268 was headed to St. Petersburg from an Egyptian resort in the Sinai Peninsula. It shattered in midair about 20 minutes after takeoff. No distress calls were received from the cockpit. An executive with the Russian airline company blames an external influence. ISIS claims responsibility in a tweet, but U.S. officials aren't convinced.
Well, we don't have any direct evidence of any terrorist involvement yet.
Russian officials also warn of making any premature conclusions. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorders have been recovered. They are being analyzed. Signs of terrorism should be easy to spot, even among the obliterated remnants of the jet.
You can certainly see whether there were any sign of a bomb or a missile striking the aircraft. They leave very distinctive marking.
Without answers, families of the mainly Russian victims find only pain and the support of a nation crying beside them. Pope Francis sent a telegram of condolence to the Russian people. He offered assurance of his prayers for all who died and for those who mourn their loss. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Thousands of federal inmates get out early in a cost-cutting move to reduce prison population. Meanwhile, President Obama calls for more support for inmates re-entering society. Mark Irons reports from the White House tonight. Mark?
Brian, today in New Jersey, the president spoke about what he calls needed changes to the criminal justice system. Some of those changes include sentence reduction for drug offenders. Now, last year, the U.S. Sentencing Commission changed its guidelines. This weekend, the first wave of early prisoner releases took place. Over 6,000 inmates across the country were released from prisons, cutting an average of 2 years off their sentences. Cocaine convictions account for almost 50% of the inmates, followed by methamphetamine, marijuana, and heroin. Texas will get the highest number of those released, followed by Florida and Iowa. New York City Police Commissioner Bill Bratton questions if there are enough parole officers to supervise the released inmates.
So who's going to watch these people when they go out on parole?
In 2007, changes in sentencing guidelines for federal crack cocaine convictions resulted in sentence reductions for more than 16,000 federal drug offenders. A 5-year study by the U.S. Sentencing Commission compared those released early to inmates who had served their entire sentence before the new guidelines were in place. The study found that both groups reoffended at similar rates. Judge Jack Weinstein is a sitting federal judge in New York who has had to make sentence reduction decisions. Top priority, he says, is safety of the community.
And the first question the judge asks himself is, if I release this person now or shorten the sentence, will he be a greater danger to the community? And the statistics say very clearly no.
During his recent U.S. visit, Pope Francis spoke to inmates at a Philadelphia prison. He said all of us are invited to encourage, help, and enable your rehabilitation. Now, 40,000 drug offenders could be eligible for a sentence reduction, and there is bipartisan support for sentence reform. Of course, another bipartisan effort was the recent budget bill. The president signed that into law today. Brian?
Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. And last week, CNBC Republican debate leads to a GOP revolt. Presidential candidates have a list of demands for more control in future debates. Catherine Szeltner is here with more. Catherine?
Brian, candidates say last week's debate lacked substance and the moderators asked gotcha questions. Now the presidential hopefuls want to make sure that doesn't happen again.
The questions that have been asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media.
Presidential debates are meant to put rivals head to head, but this one is bringing GOP candidates together.
And I hope it was a signal, quite honestly, to the liberal media that they need to be more deliberate, more balanced, and more respectful.
Representatives from more than a dozen campaigns met behind closed doors for nearly 2 hours last night.
It's a great room. It really was like a fun Sunday night dinner with a bunch of old friends.
Governor Christie is committed to keep on debating. We want to be in front of the voters as much as possible. We went to the meeting because we wanted to listen, so that's all we did, and it was a great meeting.
The Sunday meeting, organized by Ben Carson's campaign manager, shut out leaders from the Republican National Committee.
The RNC is still going to be a partner with the campaigns in all of this. All the campaigns wanted that, and the RNC will have a role, but the campaigns will be doing the format negotiations.
As the meeting outside D.C. wrapped, the GOP demands emerged. A 2-hour time limit, 30 seconds for opening and closing statements, and equal speaking time for each candidate. If TV networks don't meet those demands, candidates may look at other options.
I think we can look beyond television partnerships. Facebook and Twitter and Google and YouTube, you know, it is 2015 and not 1980. We can do things a little differently.
Catherine Szeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thanks, Catherine. Sarah Westwood, a political correspondent with the Washington Examiner, is with us. How much control does the RNC have over these debates?
In the past, they haven't had that many debates. In 2012, you saw there were 20 different debates, and that was seen as sort of a chaotic structure. So this year, they tried to take more control by planning each debate, the format for them, who would host them. The campaigns didn't like that very much, though.
So what are the National Committee leaders saying, and what are they doing?
They're saying that they're trying to be as responsive to the campaign's requests as possible. You saw they suspended their partnership with NBC for an upcoming debate pending a renegotiation of some of the terms of that debate because they want to be an advocate for the campaigns and they don't want the party to be out of sync with the candidates when it comes to these debates, which are so crucial to getting votes in the primaries.
Is it realistic to cut the networks out of this process?
Well, yes and no. In one sense, these debates bring in so much money for the networks because they get an exclusive, because there are millions and millions of viewers turning in. They are amenable to what the campaigns want because they don't want to lose the chance to make all this money. So in that sense, you know, they are going to be receptive to these demands. But on the other hand, you know, they're the ones hosting the debates. They're the ones at the end of the day asking the questions, so you can't totally take their demands out of the question.
Interesting dilemma, too. In cutting out NBC, you eliminate the Hispanic partner Telemundo, which means you don't reach those voters. That's crucial.
It is crucial, and there's been some controversy over that because you have, on the one hand, the Jeb Bush campaign saying even if NBC isn't brought back to the table, we want to find a way to incorporate Telemundo. And then you have the Donald Trump campaign who has sparred with Telemundo in the past saying if Telemundo is a partner, we won't participate. So you have a real dilemma on the RNC's hands here.
A political soap opera, basically. I wonder if the individual candidates might consider just refusing to do it if they don't agree with the network that's hosting.
That's always a possibility. No one's going to put a gun to their head and drag them to the debate, but they're so important to getting their message out in front of viewers. It can make or break campaigns. So if a candidate does decline to participate in a debate, it really only hurts themselves.
Sarah Westwood with the Washington Examiner. We always appreciate the insight. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Fred Thompson is remembered on Capitol Hill and in Hollywood tonight. The actor, former U.S. Senator, and one-time presidential candidate died of lymphoma in Nashville Sunday. Wyatt Goolsbee has more tonight.
You know, one day this chair is going to be empty.
He was known for his larger-than-life persona on screen.
Everybody says that.
And Capitol Hill alike. Freddie Thompson first garnered national fame as an attorney during the Watergate scandal, leading the line of questioning that uncovered the audio taping system in the Nixon White House Oval Office.
I was walking the walk when others weren't even talking the talk yet.
A commanding presence towering over his peers at 6'6", Thompson parlayed his notoriety into a successful movie and TV career.
Advocacy is warm-blooded. Enforcement's got to be cold-blooded.
Most notably in his prominent role as the no-nonsense, straight-shooting district attorney on Law & Order.
It's my office and my decision.
In 1994, Thompson won a special election to fill Al Gore's vacant U.S. Senate seat in Tennessee, and then was re-elected for a full term 2 years later.
I'm running for president of the United States.
All right! He ran unsuccessfully for the Republican presidential nomination in 2008.
I thought I was going to be the best actor on the stage.
But he is most remembered for being a man of the people. His family mourning the death of the dynamic Southern statesman, releasing a statement reading in part, "He enjoyed a hearty laugh, a strong handshake, a good cigar, and a healthy dose of humility. Fred was the same man on the floor of the Senate, in the movie studio, or the town square of his home." The folksy former U.S. Senator and actor lost his more than decade-long battle with lymphoma at 73 years of age. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Wyatt. Federal investigators positively identify the wreckage of the ill-fated cargo ship H.E.R.O. The ship, with its crew of 33, sank in about 15,000 feet of water east of the Bahamas a month ago during Hurricane Joaquin. No survivors have been found. The National Transportation Safety Board says sonar indicates the ship landed upright. That could help in the recovery of the black box. The NTSB says the U.S. Navy is continuing to survey the area surrounding the wreckage. The Vatican arrests 2 people, including a Monsignor, in the latest probe of leaks of confidential Holy See documents. The Monsignor, a Vatican employee from Spain, is being held in a Vatican City jail. A woman identified as Francesca Ciauqui had served on a commission set up by Pope Francis in 2013. She cooperated in the probe and is not being held. A Mexican cardinal says Pope Francis will arrive in Mexico February the 12th to start his long-awaited visit to that country. He is expected to address the drug-related violence in Mexico as well as the immigration issue. The Holy Father considered entering the U.S. from Mexico in September, showing solidarity with migrants, but his schedule didn't allow for it. Pope Benedict XVI visited Mexico in March of 2012. Coming up, they call it H.E.R.O, the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance. Would it protect rights or violate basic values? And Royal Celebration. Kansas City takes the World Series in 5 games. It's November 2nd. On this All Souls Day, we pray for the faithful departed. The church teaches we can help those in purgatory through prayer and penance on their behalf. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Houston's residents vote tomorrow on a controversial ordinance. Proponents say it will protect gays and transgender people in the nation's 4th largest city.
Houston's Proposition 1 bathroom ordinance. What does it mean to you? Any man at any time could enter a woman's bathroom simply by claiming to be a woman that day.
It's called the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance, or H.E.R.O. Supporters claim it protects against discrimination based on sex, race, age, religion, and other categories. Even the White House and high-tech giant Apple support it. But are fundamental First Amendment values threatened? Jason Calvi sits down with Dr. Ryan Anderson of the Heritage Foundation.
So you say this law is bad policy. Why is that?
Sure. What this law does is it creates special privileges based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And where other jurisdictions have enacted laws like this, they've been used to penalize Catholic charity adoption agencies, to force them out of the adoption space. They've been used to penalize the baker, the florist, the photographer, because it's unclear what's going to count as discrimination on the basis of orientation and gender identity. Is saying that you serve all gay and lesbian customers, but you don't bake same-sex wedding cakes discrimination? Is saying that you find children homes with married moms and dads, is that discrimination? And too many jurisdictions are saying, yes, that's illegal discrimination under these sorts of laws.
And in Houston, what are you hearing from the Houston residents about their concerns about this ordinance?
Their concerns is that this is a solution in search of a problem, that there is no problem, and so you don't need the government trying to over-regulate these sorts of instances. That a much better solution is to let the businesses, let the schools, let the individuals at stake here find the best solutions for them and for their constituents. Don't have the government impose a one-size-fits-all solution on everyone.
But the supporters say this is going to stop unjust discrimination. How do you respond?
That unjust discrimination is really not taking place. If you look around the country, 91% of Fortune 500 companies already have voluntarily enacted non-discrimination statutes on the basis of sexual orientation. We don't need the government telling the baker, the florist, the photographer, Catholic charity adoption agencies that what they're doing is discrimination. They simply believe we're created male and female, and that male and female are created for each other. That should be legal.
So we'll see what the Houston voters decide tomorrow. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Republican presidential candidates debate 3 more times in the next 3 months. In previous debates, moderators questioned Republican candidates about their views on abortion. The topic was never raised during the Democratic debate. Now the National Right to Life Committee breaks down the candidates' life issues voting records. We have David Osteen, executive director of that committee, with us. Is this clearly along party lines now?
Absolutely. The Democratic Party is as pro-abortion as it could be, and the Republican Party has a very strong pro-life stand. The candidates break down that way. You could not be more pro-abortion than Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. Hillary Clinton voted to keep partial birth abortion legal, and the Republicans have a strong field of pro-life candidates.
Do any of them waver, though, on this issue?
Well, George Pataki has a mixed record on abortion, a mixed stand, but all of your top candidates have taken pro-life stands. We've got those that have been governors have strong pro-life gubernatorial records, other than Pataki. Those that are in the Senate or have been senators have strong pro-life records. So we're going to have a strong pro-life candidate.
What else do you look for when you grade these candidates? I mean, you don't officially grade them, but as voters, what should we be looking for?
Well, pro-life voters want someone that will work for whatever legislation we can today to save as many lives as we can, like the pain bill to protect unborn babies that can feel pain, the bill to ban dismemberment abortions, not fund organizations that do abortions like Planned Parenthood, and ultimately the kind of candidate that will give us judges who will see that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided.
So life is such a crucial issue, and yet it's so politicized. Is that good or bad for the pro-life movement that this is such a dividing issue here in this country?
Well, we're talking about life and death.
Right.
Life and death. And abortion on demand was given to us through the political process, and we have to, once again, be able to protect the lives of unborn children through the law.
Do you think the National Right to Life Committee will actually endorse a particular candidate?
Well, we haven't endorsed in the primary. We have so many strong pro-life candidates. We will definitely endorse in the general election, and our political action committees, the National Right to Life PAC and the National Right to Life Victory Fund, will be heavily involved.
David, what do you think of the chances of us having a pro-life president?
I think we have a very good chance, especially with the likelihood that we have someone as radically pro-abortion as Hillary Clinton as the Democratic nominee.
But it's going to take pro-life people
It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, and a lot of votes, and a lot of prayer.
David Osteen, Executive Director of the National Right to Life Committee. Thank you for being with us, David.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Well, partying continues today in Kansas City as Royals fans celebrate a World Series championship. The Royals wrapped up the Fall Classic with a come-from-behind win, 7-2 over the Mets last night. That game lasted 12 innings. A parade in the streets of KC is planned for tomorrow. It's great to have Father Richard Rocha, chaplain for the Kansas City Royals, with us. Father, how do you keep these guys humble with this big win?
Reminding them at Mass always with humility and service. But what a wonderful season we've had. 2 seasons, really.
It's been a great accomplishment. What is your approach as chaplain for a bunch of guys who are so talented and really doing so well in life?
You know, always to stay rooted in Christ, and you know, they're reminded of that at Mass, and what a wonderful opportunity we have to have the Mass celebrated in the stadiums, as Catholic Athletes for Christ is really trying hard to do.
Father, do you have spiritual leaders among the players, guys like Mike Sweeney?
Yes, Mike's a very important part as far as the spiritual atmosphere, especially with our Catholic men. And we've really seen a small increase in the number of players and coaches and staff that have come in to be able to take advantage of this Mass. So he's a wonderful spiritual leader for us.
Don't Major League Baseball players face some real challenges to their faith?
They sure do. challenges in regards to just different aspects, the time away from their family, also, maybe being challenged by other faiths, in regards to defending their own faith, our Catholic faith.
Well, Father Richard Rocha, thanks so much, and congratulate the guys there in Kansas City. I'm sure it's a royal celebration.
Yes, thank you, and God bless. Go Royals.
Up next, a monumental shift in U.S. strategy in Syria. We have analysis from an expert. And Pope Francis travels across Rome to Verano Cemetery to celebrate All Saints' Day Mass. It's Monday, November 2nd, All Souls Day. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, the United States prepares to deploy ground troops to Syria despite the president's earlier promise not to do so.
I will not put American boots on the ground in Syria. I will not pursue an open-ended action like Iraq or Afghanistan.
That was 2013. The White House now says less than 50 special operations forces will be dispatched to train and advise Syrian forces fighting ISIS. Secretary of State John Kerry says the decision is consistent with the president's original stance. Stephen Bucci with the Heritage Foundation is with us. He works with foreign and national security policy. How is this consistent with the original Obama administration stance?
Well, it's really not, but his original stance was not tied to reality. The president likes to try and set those hard lines, but that's not the way you do foreign policy, and it's definitely not the way you do war.
So the administration says this is not a combat mission, yet the troops there will defend themselves if they need to. Do you see that likely?
I think it is likely they'll have to defend themselves, and no offense to the President and Secretary of State, when you put guys in harm's way in a country like Syria in the midst of a war, it's a combat mission.
And we've had this happen before. Isn't this precisely how we got drawn into the conflict in Vietnam?
Not exactly the same. We had advisors in Vietnam supporting an established government. These guys are there to help people fend off an entity like ISIS. That's a little different. This is a world problem that has to be dealt with, and hopefully it won't turn out quite the same way.
Do you think this is an effective strategy in trying to neutralize ISIS?
This is the way we should have been going about a year and a half ago. I'm very concerned that this is too little, 50 guys, and way too late to really be as effective as we need.
Do you think that we'll see an increase in the number of troops there? If 50 is too little?
That's a possibility, but people need to remember ISIS is not an Iraqi problem. It's not a Syrian problem. It's a problem for the region and for the world, and they need to be dealt with.
Do you think that the world is united in this fight against ISIS, or is it too fractured to have any positive effect?
I think the world is still kind of lining up, but I hope they'll figure it out pretty soon. This is everybody's problem.
It's interesting, too, coming so late in the presidency of President Obama, what this might leave the next president with.
It's going to leave the next president with a mess, regardless. It appears President Obama is trying to run out the clock and at least do something, but I'm afraid it's not going to be as effective as it needs to be.
Stephen Bucci with the Heritage Foundation, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your input.
Thanks for having me.
Pope Francis travels to Rome Cemetery to celebrate Mass for All Saints' Day on Sunday. The Holy Father leaving a white rose on one grave, clergy members and lay faithful joined him. He reflected on the Beatitudes spoken by Jesus. Earlier, the Pope prayed the Angelus with visitors in St. Peter's Square. He focused on the call to be saints that we all receive in Christian baptism. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. On this All Souls Day, we leave you tonight with Pope Francis visiting the tombs today of those who came before him. Good night and God bless.